Bienvenue, les aventures de Frank et Ben. Troisième série, Frank and Ben go back to Perkins on a Greyhound bus. Deuxième histoire, Frank and Ben go back to Perkins, part 2. What have we here? 3 different groups of young people who, as it seems, are all looking for a good time. 3 different groups of young people who, as it seems, have different ideas about what a good time is. The young man standing in the aisle next to the young woman, as well as his 2 friends sitting at the back of the bus, think that having a good time is acting up, joking around, and even risking getting thrown off the bus. The 2 young women sitting in the middle of the bus and across the aisle from Frank and Ben think that having a good time is enjoying the scenery and not being harassed by such types as they were unfortunate enough to have sit beside them and try to engage them in conversation. The 2 boys who are returning from Winnipeg and sitting across the aisle from these young women think that having a good time is, to put it negatively, so that all their adventures, or perhaps what should be called their misadventures, can be recapitulated. Not reading books in Chapter's bookstore, or 2, getting a speeding ticket from a mean-looking police officer, or 3, being kicked out of an Irish pub by an equally mean-looking bouncer, or 4, getting the cold shoulder from a couple of girls in the huge cafeteria at the Rideau Center. One was dressed in a St. Joseph's School uniform and wore pigtails, and the other was dressed all in black and had blue hair and a ring in her nose. Or 5, being laughed at for some unaccountable reason by 2 strange girls who they happened to meet in Maurice's apartment. Maurice is Ben's older brother. Or 6, almost getting into a fight with some racist teenagers in downtown Winnipeg in another huge cafeteria. Or 7, being overworked on their uncle's ranch and at about the same time being locked out of their aunt's house and having to wait 3 hours on the doorstep. Well, what is it with you 2? The young man who's standing and swaying in the aisle says to the quietly seated young women. Do you think you're so good with your fancy luggage you can look down your noses on other people? The young women continue to ignore the young man, even though he is talking loudly and making a scene. People start to stare at him and whisper. Frank says to him finally, "Leave them alone. Can't you see they don't want to talk to you?" Swiftly, the young man turns around and tells Frank, in a very forceful and even vulgar way, to mind his own business. Frank almost reacts violently to this, but Ben, knowing his friend well, grabs him by the arm and holds tightly. A few seconds pass with a good deal of tension and hostility in the air. Fortunately, before the young man can open his mouth again and make the situation even worse, the bus driver, peering into his rear view mirror, sees that there is trouble brewing. He gets on the loudspeaker and says in a firm voice, "If it is reported to me that anyone has been harassing or intimidating others, the offending party will be put off this bus immediately." There is then the loud click of the microphone being shut off and several seconds of silence. The young man stares angrily around him as if he were ready to attack anyone who might give him a hard time. Finally, he starts to move off to rejoin his friends. But then, as if remembering something, he turns around, comes back, and looks down at Frank, who is sitting calmly in his seat. He says to him in a low, threatening voice, "We'll settle this at the next stop."